So I saw a video the other day by YouTuber Zach Ramelin, I'm sorry if I get your name wrong, and it was called Getting the A24 Look in 3 minutes. And I thought it was really interesting. There was a lot of like simple, quick and easy lighting setups and techniques that work really well, but there was one thing that kind of stayed on my mind throughout the entire video, and that was, okay, but what exactly is the A24 Look? Very early on in the video, it seems like the A24 Look gets generalized into this approach of heavy contrast, embracing a lot of darkness and shadows, using big soft sources to light your subjects. And while that is like, those are good ways to get more cinematic and flattering images, I wouldn't really say that's the A24 look. After all, I don't really know how a studio can have a look. And I'm not saying that this general approach to lighting isn't seen in a lot of A24 films, but there's plenty of A24 films that don't follow this trend of lighting, just as there are plenty of films not by A24 that do. I just saw Zone of Interest recently, and for me, it was one of the wildest experiences I've had in a theater recently because the cinematography in that movie was so bold. I mean, this is a film that shot almost entirely in these big static wide shots using what looked like mostly available light. It's colored very well, but there's this like weird digital clarity to the image. It's very low contrast. It's really unique. It's a beautifully shot film, but it doesn't really fit into this idea of the A24 look. I feel like the reason that we love A24 so much is because it feels like it's the only mainstream studio that is really letting an artist be an artist. Where there's all these other studios that feel like they're going down a checklist, making sure that like the film is gonna be the most profitable as possible. A24 really feels like they're trying to get an artist's vision out there. And that's not to say that they don't care about profits either, because at the end of the day, they are a mainstream studio. But A24 seems to have curated such a loyal fan base that they're able to take more risks with what they put out, knowing that there's gonna be butts in seats. And I think the fact that there are so many different videos that are about how to get the A24 look and how to make your film feel like an A24 film, I feel like that is proof of that. Now, this is where I wanna get into what I think the A24 look is personally, and I think that that look is nothing. I don't think the A24 look exists. The thing that I think is so beautiful about cinematography is that you have so much power over the audience. You get to put them wherever you want. You get to make them feel however you want them to feel. You are this curator of mood and tone, and there's endless ways you can curate. One of the reasons I think that Roger Deakins is the best cinematographer is not necessarily because of his work, but it's his philosophy behind it. I often recall this interview he did where he talks about his approach on how he like films a scene and how he's always thinking about what is going to be the most interesting perspective to put the audience in. Let's just say you have a standard scene of two people sitting and talking at a table. You can always just get your standard coverage of that, grab a wide shot, get your over the shoulders. That's great. But what if you didn't do that? If we have this mundane scene of just two people talking at a table, what would be the most interesting perspective to view this from? What is the context of the scene? Are these two people enemies? Something as simple as putting the camera physically in between the two characters so that they don't share any screen space together could do a lot to change the feel of that interaction. I mean, this is why Zone of Interest was so interesting to me, because I don't think I've seen a film that was shot like that before. For me, I felt like the filmmakers had found this fresh, unique perspective to put the audience in for that story. It was consistent, the lighting matched, it felt raw and real. It was like watching CCTV footage that was composed by a cinematographer. So earlier when I mentioned how A24 allows the artist to be an artist, I feel like that's how we've come to develop this A24 look. I think what we're seeing is time after time again, these new generation cinematographers are getting their chance to film a feature, and they are pulling out all of the stops to try and create something that they feel no one has seen before. And it also helps that as like technology progresses, we're getting the means to do more interesting stuff with cameras and lighting that we never could do before. It's all just breeding innovation. So if you're a young cinematographer and you have a project coming up and you're very inspired by A24 films, don't look up a guide on how to achieve an A24 look. You can't just distill these things into like a simple look or lighting setup. If you do that, you're just gonna end up trying to emulate things on set, and when you're trying to emulate things on set, it's gonna end up hurting you in the story. If you want to achieve an A24 look, what I would do is I would read the script, figure out what the story is, what the theme is, how you want it to feel, and I would try to come up with a plan for what would be the most unique way to try and achieve that. Try to think to yourself, I've never seen this type of story shot or lit this way, and run with that. I think you might find at the end of the project, when you sit down and you watch it, that you've created something wholly original, and that is what would interest A24. That's the A24 look. This was a little bit of a rant, but I felt like I wanted to make this because I think it's incorrect to try and distill an entire catalog of films into a basic look and then try to sell that to young up-and-coming cinematographers who want to learn. You know, being a cinematographer is really hard work, and that's because as a cinematographer, you're also an artist, and making art is hard. So if you're an up-and-coming DP, what are you gonna do to move the needle forward? That's all for my rant. Bye.